Hey everyone, welcome back to the Neuro Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Joe, and today I'm joined by my guest, Dr. Jacob Cooke. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Joe. Very nice to meet you. Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. So you are calling us all the way from England, right?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Across the pond.
Across the pond, yep, just a stone's throw away. What part of England are you practicing in currently?
So I'm in the south of England, so close to west of London. So London's in kind of the southeast of England, and I'm just west of that. So about an hour's out of London. That's probably, if I say Woking, no one will know that. So London is probably the easiest thing to say.
Gotcha. And today you wanted to come on and talk to our guests about the connection between specifically low back pain and center of pressure or balance, correct?
Absolutely. It's a really important, balance in general is really important and something that is generally overlooked. When we look at health, people tend to focus on cardiovascular health, looking at their heart. People are talking about the brain all the time, especially with, fantastic podcasts like your own. We're always talking about brain health and how to keep your brain healthy. But falls are one of the biggest causes of injury. So we know that falls are responsible for around 20 to 30% of all injuries. Across all age ranges, falls are one of the biggest causes of accidental death. So if you take car crashes and motorbikes out of the equation, falls are the biggest one. And then back pain is the leading cause of pain and disability worldwide, and has been for a long time and isn't changing. Despite everything we do, it's going to be the number one for a while. So I've got a real interest in back pain, but also falls, because they're the two things that really cause a lot of pain and disability in our society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, it's a huge issue, and so many people are dealing with back pain and fall risk as well. So we're going to hopefully connect the dots today, which I think is fantastic. Before we do that, however, would you mind enlightening our guests on a little bit about your background and how you got so interested in this particular topic?
Yeah, so trained as a chiropractor in the UK. So I qualified from the ACC. Again, that's on the south coast of England. I think back in 2009. Went to my first CARAC seminar, so my first kind of neurology seminar back in, I think, 2012. Passed the board exams a couple of years later, and that really was my road into neurology. So really starting to understand how the neuromusculoskeletal system really works, and trying to help people, mainly with pain. So although we study a lot of stuff in neurology, the patients I see are pain patients. So I wanted to continue my learning. So I'm currently in my final year of a master's in musculoskeletal neuroscience. So slogging my way through that last dissertation now, and then hopefully done in a couple of months' time. So that's kind of been my journey now, particularly with a focus on balance and pain.
Mm-hmm. So with a background like that, you are definitely the man for the job for this topic. So I'm very excited to pick your brain and see where this conversation goes. So right off the bat, we're talking about pain, and we're talking about balance and fall risks. With your research so far, what have you found as far as the connection?
So we know there's an association between back pain and balance. But we don't know which way it goes yet. So we know that patients with back pain, with low back pain, have bad balance. And we know that patients with bad balance often have back pain, but we don't know which way. Does back pain cause bad balance, or does bad balance cause back pain? And you could argue it could be either way. Mm-hmm. So to have a healthy spine and to be pain-free, you need really good neuromusculoskeletal control. So all movement is this fine balancing act between how stiff and stable a joint is and how flexible and mobile it is. So a stiff, stable joint is generally quite safe. It's just not very functional. So if I was to fuse my elbow so I couldn't move it, it'd be very safe. There's a low risk of injury. You could run against it. You could drop an anvil on it. The joint would be pretty safe. But I couldn't use it to shake your hand or to write a letter or anything like that. So we have to sacrifice some of that stability and have more flexibility. Now, flexibility is very functional. If you look at a lot of the world's top athletes, they're often hypermobile, so they have this amazing range of motion, but it's inherently more risky. So think of someone who repeatedly dislocates their shoulder, things like that. So when we're looking at back pain, we're trying to walk this fine line between having a stable joint, but one that is also flexible and functional. And it's the same for balance. For balance, we need to have, we're trying to basically keep ourselves upright. So if you imagine, say, a pyramid has a very wide base. It's very stable. You're never going to push a pyramid over. If you turned it up the other way around, so that now you've got a very narrow base, in theory, if you had a room that had no wind or any other kind of forces acting upon it, you could balance that pyramid upside down. It'd just be very, very, very hard. And we're the same. We're kind of almost like this pyramid. We're kind of inherently unstable. So we have to have very fine muscular control to look after ourselves and make sure we don't fall over. And so when we have back pain, unfortunately, the simple equation is sensation creates movement, movement creates sensation. So whenever you're trying to move, you're using sensation from your eyes, your ears, and feedback from your muscles and joints. So visual system, the vestibular system, and proprioception. So you're using this feedback system to create a map of your body and your environment. And so very simply, you want to know who you are, where your body is and where things are around you. And once you know who you are and where you are, you can decide how to move. So sensation helps you create that fine balancing act of mobility. So you're not too flexible, but you're not too stiff and stable. Unfortunately, when you have back pain, you lose, let's say it just hurts to move. You're not going to do the movements that hurt you. So you avoid certain movements. It basically robs you of some of that proprioception. As you lose that sensation, movement then changes. So that sensation drives movement, movement drives sensation. So with back pain, we change the sensation we get, therefore we change the movement we get, which changes our balance. But you could argue it the other way around. Balance requires very fine sensory processing to create very precise movement. So if we have bad balance, we're going to have bad or poor neuromuscular control, which is going to mean we're not as accurate when we're trying to maintain balance. There's going to be more stress placed on low back as it has less accurate control, and that may cause back pain. So we're at a fun place at the research, and that's what I'm trying to do as part of my master's, is trying to look at, is it one or the other, or could it go both ways? Does bad balance predispose you to having back pain? And does back pain maybe predispose you to falls? Because if it does, that's really bad news, and we want to intervene with people who have back pain and stop them from getting injured, just walking around the house.
Right. And I love how you illustrate is it the chicken or the egg kind of situation here? Is it the back pain or is it the balance that's the underlying issue? And I can envision that maybe tons of people may have back pain, right? And they go to your standard chiropractor, they get their back worked on, maybe they go to a masseuse, acupuncture, whatever it may be, to address their low back complaints, and maybe that kind of resets the connection or allows better proprioceptive information from the low back into the brain, and maybe that works.
Yeah.
And maybe it works for a time, and then the back pain comes back over and over. So then you might start to think, okay, maybe it's balance causing back pain at that point. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to your whatever primary care physician you go to, and they do a great job and get rid of your back pain, and then your back pain relapses, really when the pain goes and you have that improved sensation and you can do what you want to do, the brain should very quickly rewire and start to take control of that precise movement again. Mm-hmm. So if we then see it's 6 weeks later and you relapse and the back pain is as bad or worse than it was the first time round, exactly, we want to then look and say, well, why? That your back is the human body is amazing. We are like a great ape. We tend to think ourselves as separate from the animal kingdom, but when we've survived millennia of evolution, we've survived bigger, angrier predators trying to eat us. We're amazing animals. And we look at animals like, monkeys and marvel at what they can do, but we can do all that stuff. So if you've got someone who's just relapsing with their back pain over and over, we want to have a think and think, why is that happening? Is it that the brain is just not able to control that accuracy of movement properly? And it's not always an easy thing to do, but that's, where those of us who are kind of maybe a bit more into the neuro side of things will look and say, okay, let's not just focus on the back, but let's try and look at how the rest of the system is working. What's the visual system like? What's the vestibular system like? Are the sensory maps appropriate? Are the motor maps appropriate? And try and build from there.
Right. Like you mentioned, visual, vestibular, proprioceptive, all those things go into keeping a human being upright and balanced. So how, from your training, have you learned to assess these different things and kind of come up with an overlying picture of maybe where the deficit is lying?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one of the interesting things, and again, sometimes people say to me, well, it's a bit weird that you're into balance and back pain. Like, why dizziness conditions and back pain, why the overlap? But actually there's a lot of overlap between dizziness and back pain. So one of them would be when we talk about proprioception. Proprioception is essential. If anyone's ever been to the dentist and they numb your gum, you will find yourself biting the inside of your cheek over and over and over. And it's very simply that you can't feel where it is. So your brain is firing muscles in a faulty pattern, and you keep biting your cheek. In dizziness disorders, what we often see is that the brain starts using the vestibular system less. So it starts using your inner ear less, and it starts using vision more. So the human brain is very visual. A rat brain is olfaction. It's very smell orientated, whereas a bat brain is very sound orientated. Well, the human brain relies on vision a lot. And so what we see in dizziness disorders is often the brain reweights its sensory input so that it relies on vision too much. The problem is the visual world is full of optic illusions, tricks of light, color contrast, depth perception. So what you should do for movement is say, I saw something, but from vision alone, I don't know if it moved or I moved. So you then compare that information to what your ears and your body said. And what we see with dizziness disorders is often people start using vision too much and they fall for these optic illusions, and that creates faulty movements. This is where people can't use their phone without feeling dizzy, or they can't go on a bus or a train without feeling sick, or maybe even just walking through a supermarket makes them feel ill. And actually we see a similar thing with back pain, that the brain starts using proprioception less because we have pain interfering with how we're moving. So we get less proprioception. It starts relying on vision more. But when you look at all the rehab exercises we normally do, it's all eyes open. So you're not helping the brain to reweight. So I think one of the big changes I've made with rehab exercises is we're often going to do balance exercises, but we want to take the visual system out. So very simply, we want to have you shut your eyes and try doing balance exercises with your eyes closed, so that your brain is having to listen to what your body is saying, particularly that feedback in back pain from the spine. So I'll put people into a whole bunch of challenging poses to try and make them work to fire that sensory system and that motor system, but at the same time rob them of vision, so they're not enforcing an unhealthy pattern. We live in the UK where, although I hate stereotypes, the weather here can be pretty dark and gloomy. And so at wintertime, we're going to see a lot of people falling over because it's dark. So we want, it should be, you can walk to the bathroom at nighttime with the lights off without thinking, God, I have to hold on to the walls. And actually you'll see a lot of patients with dizziness can't do it, but actually a lot of patients with back pain can't do it either.
No, that's perfect. And I always like to compare it to kind of a computer. You have all these different inputs to the computer, and if you've got say the visual system is telling the computer something different than what the neck is telling the computer, then you're going to have inaccurate output too. So that's just another analogy for that. But so we've obviously focused a lot on the back pain kind of being the manifestation of, I guess, the symptom, right? Maybe the biggest symptom for patients that might seek care. What about other areas of pain, like cervical pain? Do you ever find that, we'll say, inability to balance or keep yourself upright appropriately manifests itself into cervical pain or cervical stiffness, or any other types of pain?
Yeah, absolutely. So interestingly, I tried looking into this as part of my master's, so looking at the neck pain and dizziness, and actually there's not been much research at all to look at like how common that is. So in back pain, because it's the leading cause of pain, there's been plenty of research to say, look, balance and back pain. Interestingly, there's not been that much documentation on dizziness and neck pain. But when you look at the neuroanatomy of it, it makes complete sense. If I'm looking into the camera now and I'm turning my head side to side, hopefully you can see my eyes are moving left and right. Mm-hmm. Well, that's basically my ear pushing my eyes the other way. So when I turn my head to the right, my eyes get pushed to the left. When I turn my head left, my eyes get pushed to the right. The lovely thing about that is the neuroanatomy is that 25% of the signal coming from my ear goes to my eyes to move them, but 75% is going down to my neck and back to stabilize my spine. And again, we talked about stability earlier. We have to have stability, to have a safe spine. Now we want flexibility there as well. So we don't just want to be stiff and rigid. And that's what the vestibular system is doing for us, is really allowing us to have a sense of how fast am I moving, what direction. In particular, a lot of that input, we have different pathways there, and two of the pathways are going to the neck, whereas one goes all the way down the spine. So if we have a vestibular lesion, so someone has a dizziness disorder that comes from their inner ear, or maybe on the pathway that goes from the ear into the brainstem, if we lose those connections or they become faulty, you're going to see a change in stability of the neck. In particular, I'm sure you see this all the time. You'll see people with maybe a head tilt or a head rotation. Again, if you're activating muscles so that they're always compressing on one side, we've got so many nerves and joints in the neck that are pain receptive. So we have, a frequent one we'll see in the clinic is someone maybe have a slight right head tilt. And as a result, you're getting compression of the joints on the right-hand side, maybe getting compression of peripheral nerves on the right-hand side, and they get neck pain and headaches. Maybe they get shoulder pain into the chest, pain down the back. So again, when it comes to treatment, we don't want to get obsessed with posture, because we know that maybe posture it's different from person to person. We all have different bodies, different spines, so we don't get too obsessed with it. But we do want to make sure that you're balanced. The word balance maybe gets used too much, but you know what I mean. We want systems to be working as efficiently as and in concert as well as possible.
Right. I'm glad you brought up posture, because a lot of people kind of think posture is something you can just sit up straighter. Just get in the habit of sitting up straighter. But that's not always the case, is it?
No, not at all. So particularly like teenagers, we shout at teenagers because they tend to slump forward, but it's that their brain hasn't fully developed yet. It's not fully mature. Mm-hmm. So the systems, we came from monkeys, right? So we spent a long time on our hands and feet. So we've got a lot of flexor tone. So all the muscles that pull us forward, we've got a lot of neurology, a lot of nervous system that fires those muscles. As we evolved and we started to stand upright, we had to evolve newer, more recent neurology to fire extensor muscles that pull us upright. Mm-hmm. So the problem is when you're a teenager and you're I don't want to say stupid, but you're not at full power yet. That's often why you're a little bit slumped. So you can say to them, sit upright, and they might be able to do it for a few seconds, but guaranteed they'll slump back down. Mm-hmm. But most of us, by the time you get to 18, 19, 20, it's rare you look at someone in their 20s and think, oh God, you look like a teenager, you like slumpy posture. Mm-hmm. And then if you look at the other ends of the spectrum, elderly people, how many of them have poor posture? And it's, again, they're not lazy. They're not, lazy slobs. It's just that they've had degeneration of those newer parts of the nervous system. Mm-hmm. So that extensor tone starts to fail and they flex forward again.
Yeah. So obviously there's different severities of back pain, right? Some people more or less. Has there been a solid correlation established between severity and balance or risk of fall?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the older material, so if we go back 10 years, back pain was kind of treated as one thing. So when they looked at back pain severity let's say had a group of 20 or 50 people and just looked at, does balance change? The answer was no. Studies that are coming out in the last couple of years are dividing back pain into different subgroups. So they're doing that for for all kinds of conditions, but back pain in particular, looking at, is non-specific low back pain different to mild chronic low back pain? Is that different to severe chronic low back pain? Is that different to fibromyalgia? And when we're looking at balance, the neuro research seems to be finding a correlation between non-specific low back pain doesn't really seem to have much of an effect on balance. So if I have one episode of back pain that lasts a couple of days or a couple of weeks, that doesn't seem to have much impact. There doesn't seem to be much change in balance there. Someone with mild low back pain will have a change in mild chronic low back pain. So pain that is kind of more frequent, is always in the background, but doesn't really ruin their life. They will have a change in balance, but not that severe. And when we look at people with severe low back pain, that's, really having an effect on it's there every day, there we see higher levels in change of balance. So higher changes in neuromuscular skeletal control. Mm-hmm. And then, like I said earlier, that's where we're kind of trying to look at is the dysfunction high enough that becomes a risk factor for falls? Because unfortunately, a lot of conditions, when you look at a lot of conditions, they often, like 1 in 1,000 people, 1 in 10,000 people, 1 in 100, and you think, God, some of these conditions are really common, yet you never ever hear of them. Mm-hmm. And then you meet one person who has all of them. Oh, you poor person. Yeah. And so what we don't want is that because you developed chronic low back pain, that you then were at risk of falls and you broke your leg. And because you broke your leg, you now got a dodgy leg, and you can't, you don't want this ongoing cascade. Mm-hmm. You know that in the elderly, when if someone over the age of 80 breaks their hip, that's a really bad prognosis for life, not just for mobility around the home looking after themselves. We know that, I don't want to make up the number because unfortunately I can't pull it out the top of my head, but we know that it's something like in 6 months or 12 months, mortality rates are high. Mm-hmm. So we don't want our poor back pain patient falling into that. And it maybe highlights that balance training should be a part of back pain rehab.
Absolutely. And which who should be most concerned? You touched on it, but who should be most concerned as far as balance goes? Which age group should really start to take this into account?
Yeah, so very interestingly, balance is so complicated and so difficult to master that you haven't really mastered it until you hit around 30 years old, which is amazing, right? So we always look at 18, 19, 20-year-olds, those in their 20s, and we think, the youth, that beauty of youth, God, amazing athletes, they're the best. And maybe athletes have mastered balance, but the average 20-year-old still is practicing and trying to get better and better. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, balance then peaks at 39 and then starts a sharp decline. So the average person, up until about 70, 80 years old, should be able to stand on one leg for 10 seconds easy. Really, you should be able to go much longer than 10 seconds on one leg. If we have you close your eyes, which is obviously more challenging, but you should be able to do it, from 18 to 39, you should still be able to last 10 seconds. And then it starts to drop off quickly. So by the time you get to 50 years old, standing on one leg with your eyes closed, the average is about 5 seconds, which is not very long. By the time you get to 70, it's only about 2 seconds. By the time you get to 80, it's literally not worth doing. In fact, it's not worth testing with patients because you might be the reason they fall over. It's that bad. The problem is this decline in balance is a little bit like cardiovascular disease. You don't know you've got a dodgy heart until you have a heart attack and die. It's a bit like that with balance, and it sounds a bit dramatic, but it's true. Mm-hmm. The majority of people, 1 in 3 people over the age of 60 fall each year. Half of all 80-year-olds fall each year. And unfortunately, when they fall, if your nervous system is still working well, hopefully your postural reflexes are good enough that you save yourself. But over the age of 60, we see people start breaking their wrists or having like a shoulder injury. It's thought about 10 to 15% of all A&E presentations are fall related. So people just fell over and sprained their wrist or something like that. And as you get older and the brain starts to suffer more, those postural reflexes start to fail. And unfortunately, then people start hitting their head. And when they fall and hit their head, you have a traumatic brain injury. I mean, you know really well, right? Again, lifestyle and mobility and function really suffers when you hit your head. Mm-hmm. And it's the same if you don't hit your head, unfortunately, that's when you break your hip. Yeah. So if you're lucky, you break your wrist over the age of 60. And if your nervous system isn't doing very well, you start hurting stuff really seriously. So this is why I'm on a bit of a campaign that I think soon as you hit 60 years old, you should be practicing balance exercises. It should just be part of your lifestyle. You shouldn't smoke, you should cut down on drinking, you should be eating a healthy diet, you should be exercising multiple times a week. And part of that exercise should be balance exercises, because that's just as likely to get you. So we spend a lot of time worrying about, should I be taking omega-3 and vitamin D? And that stuff is really important. But, doing balance exercises might be the one that saves your life compared to a vitamin D supplement.
Yeah. So just to recap so far, two really big takeaways that I've had are, one, I'm coming up on my peak opportunity to restart my gymnastics career, maybe. Prove my balance, 30, 39. And then number two is somebody with back pain who is also kind of over 39 and getting up into like 60s, 80s, and you have back pain. That's when you really, really need to be mindful of how your balance is before something severe like a fall happens and you risk the hip injury or the head injury.
Absolutely. You'll be amazed. So I will have a patient with back pain. I'll give them balance exercises and something simple, like they'll stand in tandem stance. So one foot in front of the other, heel to toe. They'll have their hands on the wall. I'll say, close your eyes. And when you feel safe to do so, take your hands a centimeter to the wall, catch yourself as soon as you need to. They will find it very, very difficult. They'll then go home and ask their wife or husband to give it a try. And they'll come back to me and say, yeah, but my husband couldn't do it either. He was all over the place. He couldn't even last a second. And we laugh, but I say, well, that's not good. He should have been able to. Yeah. Go back, ask him to stand on one leg, see how long he can last. She'll come back and say, oh, he can only do 1 second. So, and no one can do it. I said, no, it's not that no one can do it. It's that he's got poor muscular control. He's at a risk. You need to, he needs to start doing the same exercise you will. It's investing in your long-term health.
Which that actually brings me to my next question. What are some ways that people can implement into their daily lives to maintain their balance as they age? Obviously, one being, seeing someone like yourself to get that assessment.
Great question. So balance exercises are one thing. The other big risk factor for falls and for declining in balance is mobility. So as you get older, you tend to get a little bit stiffer. So we lose our flexibility. So often what happens is it's a slow process, right? You don't realize, if you were 20 years old and suddenly woke up in the body of a 6-year-old, you would feel the difference. But you don't, because you're living in that body every day. It's like the brakes on your car slowly getting soft. You don't notice. And then when they're replaced, you kind of hit the brakes and throw yourself straight through the window. You want to either yourself check your mobility or go and see someone who can do a mobility assessment and give you some simple exercises. Some people hate stretching. The good news is strength exercises improve mobility and stretches improve mobility. So if you hate stretching, you don't have to do yoga. You can just go to the gym. And if you hate, doing strength stuff, do yoga and do, stretches. So balance exercise is really good. And you want to basically stand on one leg, stand heel to toe. You want to shift your body weight around. So a great exercise is called the clock. So you stand on one leg and you're going to imagine you're surrounded by a body of water and you're going to reach out as far as you can and just touch your toe to the water. So you're not stepping onto your foot. You're not going to fall into the water, but you just want to put a ripple in the pond. So still reach out, touch, come back to center. And then basically go around the clock. So you could do 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and just basically see how far you can reach, just subtly shifting your body weight. So that's a great exercise. Do it with your eyes open initially, because it's a hard one. If you become a master at it, so your gymnastics career is really taking off, go back to eyes closed. Yeah. You don't need to have balance balls and all this kind of crazy technical stuff. Literally just do what you're meant to do. We're meant to spend all day running, jumping, climbing trees, chasing animals. Balance was an integral part of that. So move more, but keeping good mobility, particularly toes, ankle, knees, and hips. That's where people go wrong. And back, sorry. That's where people go wrong, is they tend to, they lose flexion of their ankle, knee, and hip. So as they're trying to step over a step or over the dog, in over a cluttered room, they catch their toe, it throws their body weight forward, they've lost those postural reflexes and down they go. Whereas if you had the mobility, you might have got your toe over that step, out of the shower, whatever it was, not lost balance in the first place.
Yeah, such a minor thing, but it can make a world of a difference in someone's life.
So simple. Yeah. And again, often we focus on the really complicated stuff when it comes to health, but actually, just making sure you're limber and you're strong. That's a huge part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dr. Cooke, we are coming up on time here, but I want to make sure we budget enough here at the end for you to give any final thoughts, or if there's anything that we forgot to mention today.
No, I've loved it. I can talk about this all day. That's the problem. I can a bit of a motor mouth, as you and your listeners will note. I think that the important part when it comes to back pain is trying to look at the system as a whole. So you don't want to look at just low back pain and isolate. So yes, if you hurt your back, you want to treat the pain itself, but you don't want to focus purely on where that pain is. You want to look at how is the nervous system controlling neuromuscular control. Because if you don't get the control right, it's going to be very hard to stabilize that pain and to keep it gone. And when it comes to balance and falls, it's trying to remember this is a slow process. You need good visual system, you need a good vestibular system, and you need good proprioception. So you want to get rid of any pain and you want to try and make sure that your eyes are good. A lot of people fall over because they don't realize their vision declines with age and they just can't see stuff. But again, it's kind of subconscious until you fall. And unfortunately, the vestibular system also prone to all kinds of problems, but also it ages like the rest of us. So seeing someone like yourself or someone with a skill set that can do that assessment, tell you, hey, it's all okay, you look fantastic, or no, there's some things we can do to improve it, I think is an important part of your keeping yourself healthy.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And if somebody listens to this podcast and they really resonate with what you've said and think that this is something they want to pursue as far as their health journey, how would they get in touch with you?
So my clinic is called the Neuromuscular Clinic. We're in Woking, Surrey. So if you go to neuromuscularclinic.co.uk, I'll send you the link for that because it's a horrible word to have to spell. That's my clinic. That's the clinic for patients. You can contact me at jake@neuromuscularclinic.co.uk. And anybody who wants to be a little bit geekier and learn a bit more about neurology and these things, if you go to my website is bcneuro.co.uk. Or the Facebook page is probably more popular. I upload videos on there pretty regularly. So it's just bespoke clinical neurology seminars. So ping me a message on Facebook. I'll admit I'm not the best on social media, as I'm sure you found, Joe, but I try to check it once a week or so.
Yeah, that's great. Well, sounds like people have a lot of options to reach you. And I think this was a fantastic episode. I mean, as many people that deal with balance and back pain, among other things, this is a major concern, not just in the US, but in the UK and all over the world. So I think a lot of people are going to be able to kind of transition their lives and kind of have a focus on where they need to go next, maybe if this is an issue for them. So thank you for the knowledge today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, Joe. It's really nice speaking with you.
Of course. And then this has been your host from the Neuro Wellness Podcast. Be well.